Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Everyone talks about Black Friday like it's some kind of sport, but nobody prepared me for what I saw that morning at Westfield Shopping Center. I was 26 then, fresh out of my master's program, and broke enough to brave the crowds for a decent winter coat. My roommate Vanessa had convinced me to go with her, said we'd be in and out before the real crazies showed up. We got there at 5 in the morning, and the parking lot was already packed, cars circling like vultures waiting for someone to leave. The energy felt wrong from the start. People pressed against the glass doors, security guards nervously adjusting their radios. When those doors finally opened, the crowd surged forward like water breaking through a dam, and I remember thinking maybe I should just turn around, go home, forget about the stupid coat. But Vanessa grabbed my arm and pulled me along, and before I knew it, we were inside, swept up in this river of bodies all flowing toward different departments. She wanted electronics, I needed clothes, so we split up near the food court with a promise to meet back in an hour. The apparel section was on the second floor, and by the time I got up the escalator, it was already chaos. Racks were getting picked clean, hangers scattered on the floor like bones, and everyone had this desperate look in their eyes. I made my way toward the outerwear section, trying to stay close to the walls, avoiding the main aisles where people were literally running with armfuls of merchandise. There was this display of designer jackets near the back, marked down 70%, and that's where everything went to hell. I saw her first. This woman in a red tracksuit with bleached hair teased up like it was still 1985, and she was holding this gorgeous leather jacket, examining the price tag. Behind her, a younger woman in yoga pants was clearly eyeing the same rack, her hand already reaching for another jacket just like it. The thing is, there were only 3 of those particular jackets left. This beautiful cognac leather with silver hardware, and I counted at least 7 women circling that display like sharks. The woman in red must have sensed it too, because she suddenly grabbed all 3 jackets at once, clutching them to her chest like a lifeline. That's when yoga pants woman lunged forward, actually lunged, and grabbed the sleeve of one of the jackets, yanking hard enough that both women stumbled. What happened next was like watching a nature documentary where everything goes wrong at once. They were both screaming, not even words, just these primal sounds, and the jacket stretched between them started to rip at the shoulder seam. Other shoppers immediately descended on them, not to help but to grab for the other 2 jackets that had fallen during the struggle. A man in a business suit literally stepped on the red tracksuit woman's hand to reach for one, and she let out this howl that made my teeth hurt. Someone threw an elbow that caught yoga pants woman in the ribs, and she doubled over but didn't let go of that jacket sleeve, even as 2 more people started pulling at it from different angles. The security guard by the dressing rooms was talking frantically into his radio, but he didn't move closer, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. The crowd started pushing in from all sides, drawn by the commotion like moths to a flame, and I found myself pressed against a circular rack of blouses, the metal bar digging into my hip. A teenager with braces shoved past me, actually used my shoulder as leverage to propel himself toward the fight, and I stumbled backward into a mannequin that toppled over with a crash. The sound seemed to trigger something because suddenly everyone was grabbing and shoving, not just for those jackets, but for anything within reach. I saw a middle-aged woman with a church group tote bag slam another shopper into a mirror, which spider-webbed but didn't shatter, and the impact sound was horrible, this dull thud followed by gasping. The original fight had spread like an infection, and now there were multiple struggles happening, merchandise flying through the air, and somewhere a child was screaming in that high-pitched way that goes straight through your skull. That's when I saw the older woman, probably in her 70s, with one of those walkers that have the tennis balls on the feet. She was trying to move away from the chaos, inching along the wall toward the elevator, her face pale and confused like she'd wandered into a war zone. She almost made it too, was maybe 10 feet from safety when this wave of bodies surged backward from the main fight. A heavy-set man in a football jersey stumbled right into her, and I watched her go down hard, the walker flying one way, her purse the other. The sound she made when she hit the floor was small, almost lost in all the noise, but I heard it. This soft oh of surprise and pain. She tried to get up. I saw her hand reaching for something to grab onto. But then the crowd shifted again and people were stepping on her, over her, around her like she was just another obstacle. Her flowered blouse got caught under someone's boot and tore, exposing the pale skin of her back, and still people kept coming. I tried to move toward her. I swear I did. But the crowd had become this living thing that moved on its own logic, and every step I took forward pushed me 2 steps sideways. Someone's elbow caught me in the stomach and I bent double, gasping. And when I looked up again, I couldn't see the old woman anymore. Just feet and legs and the occasional glimpse of fabric on the floor. The jacket that started it all was now in pieces, strips of leather hanging from different people's hands like trophies from a hunt gone wrong. A display table collapsed with a sound like thunder, sending stacks of folded sweaters cascading everywhere, and people were literally diving for them, sliding across the floor on their stomachs. The yoga pants woman was on her knees now, blood running from her nose, still clutching a piece of that jacket, and the woman in the red tracksuit was nowhere to be seen. My survival instinct finally kicked in and I started fighting my way toward the edge of the crowd, using my elbows, my shoulders, anything to create space. A woman with acrylic nails scratched 3 long lines down my forearm when I accidentally blocked her path to a fallen designer bag, and I felt the warm wetness of blood, but didn't stop moving. The emergency exit sign glowed like salvation above a door marked "Employees Only," and I didn't care. I shoved through it and found myself in a concrete stairwell that smelled like cleaning supplies and dust. My legs were shaking so bad I had to sit on the steps, and that's when I realized I could still hear the chaos through the door, muffled but constant, like listening to a storm from inside a basement. My phone was buzzing nonstop, Vanessa texting asking where I was, if I'd gotten anything good, completely oblivious to what was happening 1 floor above her. I stayed in that stairwell for maybe 20 minutes, listening to sirens getting closer, the sound of heavy boots running up and down the stairs below me. Eventually, a security guard found me, this young guy who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour, and he told me the police had cleared the floor but I needed to leave through the loading dock. He walked me down, past other shell-shocked shoppers sitting on the stairs, one woman still clutching a cashmere scarf with the tags on like she'd forgotten she was holding it. When we got outside, there were ambulances everywhere, their lights painting the concrete walls red and blue, and I saw them loading someone on a stretcher, a small form covered in a silver emergency blanket. I never found out if it was the old woman with the walker, but the way the paramedics were moving, careful but not rushed, made my chest tight with dread. Vanessa found me sitting on a parking barrier near the loading dock, and she was furious at first, holding 2 shopping bags and complaining that I'd made her leave the electronics line where she'd been about to score a flat-screen TV for $200. But then she saw my arm, the scratches already turning dark and puffy, and her face changed. We drove home in silence except for the news on the radio. Reporters already calling it the worst Black Friday incident in the state. 7 people hospitalized, 1 in critical condition. They interviewed shoppers who described it like some kind of natural disaster, unavoidable, nobody's fault, just the price of good deals. One woman actually said, and I'll never forget this, that it was worth it because she got her grandson the gaming system he wanted. Worth it. Like those weren't human beings bleeding on that floor. Like that old woman hadn't been somebody's grandmother, somebody's mother, trying to buy a gift for someone she loved. The story made national news for about 2 days before getting buried under some political scandal, and the mall reopened the next morning, like nothing had happened. They put up a small plaque near customer service about shopping safely, and hired more security for the next year. But that was it. I went back once, months later, because I needed to return something Vanessa had ordered online, and when I walked past that apparel section, they'd completely redesigned it. New layout, different lighting, like they were trying to erase what happened there. But I could still see it, the exact spot where that old woman fell, now covered by a cheerful display of spring dresses. The store manager recognized me somehow, maybe from security footage, and offered me a $50 gift card for my troubles that day. Like that would make it better. Like that was the price of watching someone get trampled for a jacket nobody even remembers now. I never went shopping on Black Friday again, obviously. And I can't even walk into a crowded store without planning my exits, watching for signs of that particular energy that comes before violence. Sometimes I dream about it. Not the fighting or the blood, but that soft "oh" the old woman made when she hit the ground. That tiny sound of surprise that someone her age, someone who'd lived through whatever she'd lived through, could still be shocked by human cruelty. Vanessa still goes every year, says I'm being dramatic, that it was a freak accident, but she wasn't there in the middle of it, didn't see how quickly people can stop being people when they want something badly enough. The scratches on my arm healed into 3 thin white lines that I tell people came from a cat, because how do you explain that you got them from a stranger fighting over a designer bag, while an old woman was dying 10 feet away, and nobody stopped to help, nobody even slowed down, because the sales only lasted while supplies did. November always meant tight budgets for me, juggling rent and student loans while watching everyone else prep for the holidays. I'd been eyeing the new PlayStation for months, saving whatever I could from my job at the warehouse district, telling myself maybe next year when things got better. But when that Black Friday alert popped up on Market Direct at 4 in the morning, showing a seller named Gamer Depot listing 5 units at 60% off for quick sale, pickup only, my finger moved faster than my brain. $200 for a console that never dropped below $500 anywhere else. The listing had already been up for 3 minutes when I found it, and 2 units were gone. I grabbed my keys and headed out while most people were still sleeping off their Thanksgiving dinners, thinking I'd beaten the system for once in my life. The pickup address led me 40 minutes outside the city to an industrial area I knew pretty well from my delivery routes. Building after building of concrete and corrugated metal, most of them dark except for the occasional security light casting long shadows across empty parking lots. The GPS kept recalculating as I drove deeper into the complex, past a shuttered textile factory and rows of storage units, finally announcing I'd arrived at a loading dock behind what looked like an abandoned electronics distributor. No signs, no company name, just a rusty number spray-painted on a dented roll-up door. I parked near the only functioning streetlight and checked the Market Direct app twice to make sure I had the right place. The seller's message from an hour ago just said, "Pull up to Bay 7, we'll bring your order out." I sat there for maybe 5 minutes with the engine running, watching my breath fog up the windshield while the heater struggled against the cold. Part of me wanted to message the seller, but the bigger part just wanted to grab the console and get out of there. The whole setup felt sketchy, but $200 was $200, and I'd already driven all this way. Finally, I saw movement near the loading dock, a door opening that I hadn't even noticed before, one of those personnel entrances cut into the larger bay door. 3 guys stepped out, all wearing dark hoodies despite it being freezing outside, none of them carrying anything that looked like a PlayStation box. They started walking toward my car in that casual way that somehow made every muscle in my body tense up, spreading out slightly as they got closer, like they were trying to surround my vehicle without making it obvious. The tallest one, maybe 6'3" with a scraggly beard poking out from under his hood, knocked on my driver's side window with his knuckles, gave me this wide grin that showed a gold tooth near the back. I cracked the window just an inch, keeping my foot hovering over the gas pedal, and he leaned in close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke and something sour on his breath. "You here for the PlayStation?" he asked, voice friendly, but his eyes scanning my car's interior, checking if I was alone. When I nodded, he gestured toward a white van parked in the shadows about 30 feet away, no license plates that I could see. "We keep the inventory in there, safer than leaving expensive stuff in the warehouse. Just pull up behind us and we'll get you sorted." The other two guys were already moving toward the van, but something about how they kept looking back at me, how they positioned themselves between my car and the exit, made every instinct scream at me to leave. "Actually, could you just bring it here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache. "I'm kind of in a rush, got work in an hour." The tall guy's smile faltered for just a second before coming back even wider, and he exchanged a quick glance with one of his buddies, a shorter guy with face tattoos creeping up his neck like black vines. "Come on, man. It'll just take a second. We got all the units right there, still sealed in the boxes. You can pick which one you want." He started pulling the door handle from outside, testing it, and when he found it locked, his whole demeanor shifted. The fake friendliness drained from his face like water through a sieve, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Don't make this complicated," he said, voice dropping an octave, and I saw his right hand move to his waistband, lifting his hoodie just enough to show the handle of something metallic tucked into his jeans. That's when I made my decision, probably the fastest one I'd ever made in my life. I slammed the car into reverse, tires screaming against the asphalt as I floored it backward, nearly clipping the guy with the face tattoos who had to dive out of the way. The tall one was shouting something, banging his fist on my trunk as I spun the wheel hard, throwing the car into a chaotic 180 that left rubber marks on the concrete. In my rearview mirror, I saw them scrambling toward the van, and I knew I had maybe 10 seconds before they came after me. The industrial complex was a maze of identical buildings and narrow access roads, and I'd just given up my only advantage of knowing the area from my delivery routes by panicking and taking the first turn I saw, which led deeper into the complex instead of toward the main road. My old Corolla's engine was screaming as I pushed it harder than I ever had, taking corners so fast the whole car tilted on two wheels. Behind me, I could hear the van's engine roaring to life, see its headlights sweeping across the buildings as it lurched into pursuit. They knew these roads better than me. That much became clear when they started gaining ground despite their bulkier vehicle. I blew through a stop sign at a T intersection, choosing left on pure instinct, and found myself in a dead-end loading area surrounded by tall chain-link fences topped with razor wire. The van's lights flooded my mirrors as it skidded to a stop behind me, blocking the only way out. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, taste copper in my mouth as I watched all three of them climb out of the van, taking their time now because they knew I was trapped. But then I remembered something from my delivery days, a detail that might save my life. These old loading areas all had emergency access gates for fire trucks, usually padlocked but with chains loose enough to ram through if you had enough speed. I could see it in the corner of the lot, barely visible in the darkness, a section of fence that looked different from the rest. The three men were walking toward me, spread out in a line, the tall one now openly holding what looked like a knife that caught the light from their van's headlights. I revved the engine, threw it in reverse again, and they actually laughed, thinking I was going to try ramming their van. Instead, I cranked the wheel hard right, building up as much distance as I could in the small space, then shifted to drive and floored it straight at that emergency gate. The impact felt like hitting a wall, the chain snapping with a sound like a gunshot, the fence posts bending outward as my car burst through in an explosion of sparks and twisted metal. The Corolla's front bumper was hanging by a thread, dragging on the asphalt and throwing up a shower of sparks as I careened onto a service road I'd never seen before. My windshield had spiderwebbed from the impact, making it hard to see, but I didn't dare slow down. In the cracked side mirror, I caught glimpses of the van's headlights as it struggled to follow through the destroyed gate, having to slow down to navigate the twisted metal I'd left behind. The service road connected to the main industrial thoroughfare, after what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds. And suddenly I was merging into early morning Black Friday traffic, regular people heading to regular stores for regular sales, completely unaware that I'd just escaped whatever those men had planned for me. My whole body was shaking so bad I had to pull into a gas station 3 miles down the road just to catch my breath and call the police. The cops took my report, said they'd been tracking similar scams across the state, Fake marketplace listings leading people to isolated locations for robberies. They found the loading dock area, found the tire marks and the destroyed fence, but the van and the men were long gone. The detective, an older guy named Brennan with tired eyes and coffee stains on his shirt, told me I was lucky, that most people who fell for these schemes ended up losing their car, their money, sometimes worse. He showed me photos from other cases, people beaten unconscious, one kid who'd been stabbed when he tried to run, a woman who'd been held at knife point while they cleared out her bank account at nearby ATMs. The PlayStation listing had been deleted minutes after I'd escaped. The seller account vanished like it never existed, and Market Direct claimed they had no way to track who'd posted it since the account was created with fake information and accessed through a VPN. I spent $3,000 fixing my car, money I definitely didn't have, but it was still cheaper than buying a new one. The body shop guy whistled when he saw the damage, said it looked like I'd been in a demolition derby, asked if I wanted to file an insurance claim. I told him no, paid cash, didn't want any record of my stupidity following me around. For weeks after, I'd wake up at night thinking I heard that van's engine, check my rear-view mirror constantly even on familiar roads, avoided that whole industrial district completely, even though it added 20 minutes to some of my delivery routes. The fear faded eventually, the way these things do, but I never forgot the lesson. Every Black Friday since, when those deals start popping up on marketplace apps and social media, listings that seem too good to be true from sellers with no history, I think about that morning, about how desperation and greed nearly got me killed over a gaming console I didn't even need. These days, I tell everyone who'll listen about what happened, post warnings in local Facebook groups every November, try to save other people from making the same mistake. Some believe me, others think I'm paranoid, say things like that don't happen in our area. But I know what I know. Those men are still out there, probably using different names, different locations, different bait. Maybe they've moved on to other cities, other schemes, but every holiday season they're somewhere, setting their traps, waiting for someone desperate enough or naive enough to take the bait. And the worst part is knowing that no matter how many warnings get posted, how many news stories run about these scams, there's always going to be someone like me, someone who sees that perfect deal at the perfect time and thinks they're different, thinks they're smart enough to handle it, right up until they're sitting in a police station looking at photos of what happens when these situations go wrong. My manager badge still had the Thanksgiving gravy stain from when I'd scarfed down dinner in the break room before the Black Friday chaos started. 20 hours later, I was finally walking out of that massive department store where I'd been working since my roommate ditched me with the full rent payment 2 months back. 5 years after finishing my business degree, here I was, managing the electronics department at a place where people had literally fought over discounted TVs that morning. The kind of store with 3 floors and a parking garage that seemed designed by someone who wanted customers to get lost and buy more stuff while trying to find the exit. That night in 2018, after watching suburban parents turn into wild animals over 40% off tablets, breaking up 3 actual fistfights, and having coffee thrown at me by a woman who didn't understand why we'd run out of those viral robot vacuum cleaners by noon, I just wanted to collapse. The parking lot had gone from absolute insanity to ghost town in the span of a few hours. Just scattered cars sitting under those buzzing sodium lights that turned everything a nauseating shade of orange. My legs felt like they were made of concrete, each step toward my old Corolla sending sharp pains up through my calves. And I kept telling myself that tomorrow I could sleep until my body naturally woke up. No alarms, no angry customers, no scanning endless barcodes. I was digging through my jacket pockets for my keys, passing row after row of empty parking spaces in Employee Section B, when footsteps echoed behind me, maintaining the exact same rhythm as mine, speeding up when I did, slowing when I slowed. "Hey, excuse me, sorry to bother you," came a voice, friendly but tired sounding, and I turned to see a guy in one of our store uniforms, the navy blue polo with the logo I'd been staring at all day on various coworkers. He looked maybe early 40s, salt and pepper stubble, the kind of weathered face you see on guys who work construction but ended up in retail, and he had this apologetic smile that immediately made me relax a bit. His name tag said Bradley, though I didn't recognize him from the electronics section. But then again, corporate had hired like 50 seasonal workers for the holiday rush, and they'd spread them across all departments. He was carrying one of those clear employee bags we're required to use, and I could see a wallet, some crumpled receipts, and what looked like a half-eaten sandwich inside. My ride completely bailed on me, Bradley continued, running a hand through his thinning hair in what seemed like genuine frustration, and he gestured toward the nearly empty lot with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. My brother was supposed to pick me up an hour ago, but his kids are sick and he had to stay home. Just texted me about it, and of course my phone's about to die, so I can't even call an Uber. He pulled out an older iPhone with a cracked screen, showed me the red battery icon at 2%, and I felt that familiar pang of sympathy you get for coworkers stuck in bad situations. I live really close, just over in Fairwood Gardens, you know, those townhouses off Route 47. Maybe 10 minutes from here, 15 max with traffic, though there won't be any traffic at this hour. I knew exactly where Fairwood Gardens was, had actually looked at a unit there myself when searching for cheaper rent after my roommate situation imploded, and it really was close, just a straight shot down Route 47, and then a left at the old bowling alley that had been converted into a gym. Part of me wanted to just say sorry and drive away, but standing there in that empty parking lot, seeing another retail worker stranded after the shift from hell, I couldn't bring myself to be that person. Plus, Bradley kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, rubbing his arms against the November cold, and his breath came out in little white puffs that reminded me how freezing it had gotten once the sun went down. "Yeah, sure, I can give you a ride," I heard myself saying, already regretting the delay in getting home but knowing I'd feel guilty all weekend if I left him there. Bradley's whole face lit up with what seemed like genuine relief, and he immediately started walking toward my car, talking rapidly about how he'd just started working seasonal last week, how crazy the customers had been, how some lady had tried to return a turkey to customer service because it was too heavy. Normal retail horror story stuff that anyone who'd worked Black Friday could relate to, and I found myself laughing despite my exhaustion, unlocking the Corolla and apologizing for the mess of energy drink cans and granola bar wrappers scattered across the passenger floor. He waved it off, said his car looked way worse, and settled into the seat with a grateful sigh, immediately adjusting the heating vent toward himself while I started the engine and pulled out of the parking space, heading toward the exit that would take us to Route 47. Route 47 stretched ahead of us like a black ribbon, completely deserted except for the occasional semi-truck hauling merchandise to restock stores for the rest of the holiday shopping season, their headlights cutting through the darkness before disappearing around curves. Bradley kept up a steady stream of conversation for the first few minutes, asking about how long I'd been working at the store, complaining about the new scanning system they'd implemented, normal coworker small talk that required minimal responses from my exhausted brain. But when we passed the closed bowling alley where I expected him to tell me to turn left toward Fairwood Gardens, he stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Actually, keep going straight for another mile or so. There's a shortcut through the back entrance that's faster." His voice had changed slightly, more focused, and he was sitting up straighter in the passenger seat, peering intently through the windshield at the dark road ahead. I should have questioned it, should have insisted on taking the main entrance I knew, but exhaustion makes you stupid, makes you compliant, and Bradley immediately launched back into talking about some customer who'd tried to haggle over a clearly marked price, keeping my mind occupied. We passed the lit-up sign for Fairwood Gardens' main entrance, kept driving into a stretch of road I didn't recognize, where the streetlights became fewer and farther between, where the houses thinned out and gave way to patches of woods and empty lots. "Turn right at this next road," Bradley said, pointing to what looked like barely more than a dirt path between two thick clusters of trees. "Trust me, it cuts right through to the back of the development, Saves like 5 minutes, and my house is right there at the back section. The gravel crunched under my tires as I made the turn, my headlights illuminating nothing but trees pressing in from both sides, and somewhere in the rational part of my brain, alarm bells started their delayed ringing. We drove for maybe another minute down this narrow dirt road, branches occasionally scraping against the sides of my car, with sounds that made me wince, thinking about the paint job I couldn't afford to fix, when Bradley pointed ahead to a small clearing. "Right there, just pull in there. My place is just through those trees on the footpath. Stupid developer didn't put in a proper road to the back units yet," he explained, and against every instinct that was now screaming at me, I pulled into the clearing, my headlights sweeping across dead leaves and bare dirt. The moment I shifted into park, ready to tell him this was as far as I could go, that he'd have to walk the rest, headlights blazed to life directly behind us, so bright I couldn't see anything in my rearview mirror except white glare, and a dark sedan pulled up right against my bumper, boxing us in completely. Bradley's hand moved to his door, not to open it, but to engage the lock. A soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence after I'd instinctively turned off my engine. And when I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since we'd left the parking lot, his entire demeanor had transformed. Gone was the tired retail worker, the apologetic smile, the grateful relief, replaced by someone sitting perfectly still, watching me with an expression of calm patience, like a fisherman who just felt the first tug on his line. "Here's what's going to happen," he said in a voice completely different from before, lower and stripped of any fake friendliness, while behind us a car door opened and footsteps approached on the gravel. "You're going to sit very still. Keep your hands where I can see them, and my associate is going to come around to your door." My brain went into this weird overdrive mode, like when you're taking a test and suddenly all the answers become crystal clear, and I remembered something from a self-defense video I'd watched after my roommate left, and I was living alone for the first time. Never let them take you to a second location. Never go quietly. Make noise, fight, do anything but comply when you're isolated, because compliance in these situations usually ends badly, especially in woods where nobody can hear you scream. My hand was still on the gear shift from when I'd put it in park, and without letting myself think about it too much, I slammed the car into reverse and floored it, ramming straight back into the sedan behind us with a crunch of metal that threw Bradley forward against his seatbelt, his calm expression replaced with shock. The impact wasn't hard enough to disable either car, but it created just enough space, maybe 2 feet, for me to wrench the wheel hard left and slam it into drive, tires spinning in the dirt and gravel as I shot forward at an angle, scraping past the trees with a horrible shriek of metal on bark. Bradley was grabbing for the wheel, but his seatbelt held him back just enough, and I brought my elbow across hard into his face, feeling his nose crunch with a wet snap that splattered blood across the dashboard, his scream mixing with the sound of branches smashing against the windshield as we burst through the undergrowth and back onto the dirt road. Behind us, the sedan's engine roared to life, headlights swinging wildly as they tried to turn around in the tight space, but I had maybe a 30-second head start, enough to reach the main road where there would be other cars, witnesses, safety, my speedometer hitting 60 on a road meant for 25, Bradley moaning and holding his broken nose beside me, and when we finally exploded onto Route 47, I didn't stop until I reached a gas station 5 miles away where I called 911 while Bradley stumbled out and disappeared into the darkness before the police arrived. The cops found the sedan abandoned about a mile from that clearing, stolen from a mall parking lot earlier that day, wiped clean of prints except for a few partials on the door handle that never matched anything in their system. They never found Bradley either, though they discovered the store uniform in a dumpster behind a rest stop, the name tag still attached. And when they pulled security footage from our store, there was no employee named Bradley on any shift that day, just a guy who'd somehow gotten hold of a uniform and waited in that parking lot for someone tired and alone. The detective assigned to my case, a woman with kind eyes who'd seen too much, told me I was lucky, that these kinds of operations usually targeted people during big shopping events when everyone's exhausted and their guard is down, when wallets are full of Black Friday cash, when desperation and kindness make a dangerous combination. I quit the retail job 2 weeks later, couldn't walk through that parking lot without feeling phantom footsteps matching mine, couldn't look at anyone in a store uniform without wondering if they really worked there or if they were just wearing a costume, hunting for their next victim. Found a desk job doing data entry, boring as hell but with normal hours and a secured building with key cards and cameras everywhere. The kind of place where strangers can't just walk in wearing stolen uniforms and false smiles. Sometimes I think about that night, about how close I came to whatever Bradley and his partner had planned in those woods, and I remember the weight of his hand on the door lock, that soft click that changed everything, and I'm grateful for that self-defense video, for the instinct to fight instead of freeze, for the pure luck that my old Corolla had just enough power to ram through their trap and get me home alive. My daughter needed a laptop for college, and I needed to not go deeper into debt. November 2017, the Riverside Plaza advertised a gaming laptop for 70% off, a Black Friday doorbuster that would save me $800 I could put toward her spring tuition. I pulled into the parking lot at 3 in the morning, expecting maybe a dozen early birds, but found 40 people already huddled by the garden center entrance. The main doors had triple that number. I took my place in line, told myself 3 hours in the cold was worth it, and started scrolling through my phone to pass the time. A woman ahead of me had a store map with different departments circled in red marker, and she kept refolding it, studying it like a battle plan. By 5:30, that line had transformed into something I didn't recognize. The 40 people had become hundreds, bodies packed so tight I could feel the breath of the person behind me on my neck. A guy in a football jersey pushed up beside me, talking loudly on his phone about getting 3 tablets for his kids, his elbow digging into my ribs every time he gestured. The crowd stretched back so far I couldn't see where it ended, just waves of people disappearing into the dark parking lot. When security guards appeared inside the store and started walking toward our doors, the entire mass of bodies shifted forward at once. The woman with the map stumbled, caught herself against the glass, and the pressure from behind pushed me into her. The guy in the jersey was practically standing on my heels, and somebody behind him was yelling about their spot in line. At 5:58, 2 minutes before opening, the guards reached for the door locks. The crowd compressed like a spring, and I heard glass creaking under the pressure of bodies. The woman with the map had both palms flat against the door now, trying to keep herself from being crushed against it, and I was trying to help brace her when the locks clicked open. The doors swung inward, and she fell forward, disappearing into the store as the crowd exploded through the opening. The guy in the jersey shoved past me, using his shoulder like a battering ram, and the force of people behind me lifted me off my feet. I went through those doors without my feet touching the ground, carried by the mass of bodies like driftwood in a tsunami. Inside was chaos. The careful lanes marked with rope barriers meant nothing as the human flood crashed through them, metal posts clattering to the floor. People were running in every direction, shopping carts ramming into displays, and I heard glass breaking somewhere to my left. I tried to move toward the electronics section, but the crowd had its own momentum, sweeping me sideways toward the clothing racks. A teenager next to me got tangled in a rack of winter coats and went down hard, and I reached for him but got yanked away by the surge. The main wave of bodies was pushing deeper into the store, toward the back where the big-ticket items were stocked, and fighting against it was like trying to swim upstream in rapids. Then the crowd hit a bottleneck at the electronics department entrance and everything compressed. Bodies slammed into my back, crushing me forward into the people ahead, and suddenly I couldn't expand my chest enough to breathe properly. My ribs felt like they were bending inward, and each breath came in short, painful gasps. Someone fell near my feet, and I tried to step around them, but there was nowhere to move. No space between the bodies, and more people kept pushing from behind. The person on the ground was screaming, a horrible muffled sound, and I could feel them thrashing against my legs trying to get up. But the crowd kept moving, kept pushing, and I felt my foot come down on something soft that shouldn't have been there. The screaming changed pitch, became more desperate, and I tried to shift my weight, but the mass of bodies had me pinned in place. A woman next to me was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with panic, clutching at anyone within reach. Her fingernails dug into my arm as she tried to pull herself up higher, trying to get above the crush, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had become a single organism, pulsing and swaying with its own terrible rhythm, and we were just cells being pushed through its body. I saw a man ahead of us go down, pulled under by someone grabbing his jacket, and the crowd closed over him like water. The person under my feet had stopped screaming, but I could still feel movement down there, weak attempts to push against the weight above them. My vision started going gray at the edges from the pressure on my chest, and I realized with absolute clarity that I might die here, trampled to death over a laptop sale, and my daughter would have to identify my body. Survival instinct took over. I started throwing elbows, hard, not caring who I hit, just trying to create space to breathe. The woman with her nails in my arm wouldn't let go, so I twisted sharply and heard her cry out as she lost her grip. I pushed against the person in front of me with everything I had, using them as leverage to keep from being pushed down myself. The mass was slowly flowing through the electronics entrance, and I let myself be carried, focusing only on staying upright. Each step was a fight to maintain balance, to not trip over whatever was on the floor. I kept my arms up near my chest, creating a small pocket of space to breathe, and stopped trying to help anyone else. You can't save anyone when you're drowning yourself. The electronics section opened up slightly, and people scattered toward different displays, the crushing pressure finally easing. I stumbled sideways into a tower of boxed printers, knocking several to the floor, and used the moment to gulp air into my burning lungs. My whole body was shaking, adrenaline making my heart pound so hard I could hear it over the shouting and crashes around me. Behind us, at the entrance we'd just come through, I could see people still trapped in the bottleneck, faces purple with pressure, hands clawing at the air. Someone was definitely down in there. I could see a gap in the crowd where bodies weren't quite touching the floor, like a pothole in the human river. Security guards were trying to push through from the side, but they couldn't even get close to whoever was underneath. I abandoned any thought of finding that laptop. Nothing in that store was worth what I'd just experienced, what I'd done to survive it. My shoe felt wrong when I stepped, sticky on the bottom, and I didn't want to think about why. I started working my way toward the emergency exit I'd spotted near the television displays, moving diagonal across the flow of people still pouring in. A man was dragging a huge flat-screen box across the floor, knocking people's legs out from under them, completely oblivious to the chaos he was adding to. Near the emergency door, an older woman sat on the floor against the wall, holding her wrist at an odd angle, tears streaming down her face while everyone just stepped around her. I helped her to her feet with my good arm, the other one throbbing where the panicked woman's nails had broken skin, and we pushed through the emergency exit together. The alarm screamed as we burst into the cold morning air, but it was barely audible over the sirens already approaching. 3 ambulances were pulling into the parking lot, and I could see more emergency lights coming down the access road. The older woman leaned against the building's brick wall, cradling her broken wrist, and asked me if I'd gotten what I came for. I just shook my head, couldn't find words to explain that I'd nearly killed someone with my feet, that I'd chosen my life over theirs in that doorway. She nodded like she understood anyway, like maybe she'd done something similar in there. We waited in silence for the paramedics, watching more people stumble out of various exits, some carrying merchandise, others carrying injuries, and a few being carried by others. Later, I found out 2 people died that morning at Riverside Plaza. A 43-year-old man had a heart attack in the crush near electronics, and a 19-year-old college student was trampled at the garden center entrance where I'd gone through. The news called it a tragic accident, showed security footage of the crowd surge that looked like a tidal wave of bodies, and interviewed the store manager who kept saying they'd followed all safety protocols. I never told my daughter why I came home empty-handed that day, just said the crowds were too crazy, and ordered her laptop online instead, paying full price on a credit card I couldn't afford. She thanked me for trying, completely unaware that her old man had stood on another human being to stay alive, that I'd felt someone's ribs bend under my weight and kept walking anyway. I still shop on Black Friday sometimes, but only online. When I see those doorbusters advertised, the 70% off deals that seem too good to pass up, I remember the weight of all those bodies, the pressure that turned people into animals, turned me into something I didn't recognize. I remember the woman with the map who disappeared through those doors first and wonder if she made it out okay, if she got whatever she'd circled on that paper. Most of all, I remember that soft give under my foot, the muffled screaming that stopped too soon, and how easy it was to choose myself when survival was all that mattered. They never released the names of the victims, but I know one of them was under me in that doorway, and I know I'm part of the reason they didn't make it out. That laptop would have saved me $800, but what I did to survive that sale cost me something I can never buy back. Owning a small boutique means most days are predictable, quiet even. Violet Thread had been my baby for about 6 years, tucked into a corner spot in downtown Portland with my business partner Jade. We sold curated vintage pieces and some local designer stuff. And honestly, we were happy with our little niche. Then one random Wednesday in 2022, I posted a video on TikTok showing this incredible collection of vintage leather jackets we'd just acquired, and the thing exploded. Like 2 million views in 3 days kind of exploded. Suddenly we had people messaging us from across the country, asking if we'd hold items, if we shipped internationally when our next sale was. Jade and I decided to go all in on Black Friday that year. We'd never done anything major before, maybe had 40 customers trickle through on a normal sale day. But we sensed this could be different. Still, nothing prepared me for what I saw when I pulled up to the shop at 4 a.m. that Friday and found a line of people wrapped around the entire block, past the coffee shop, past the bookstore, some of them holding folding chairs and thermoses. The second I unlocked that door, it was like releasing a dam. Bodies poured in, voices overlapping, hangers scraping, and within 10 minutes our tiny checkout counter had a line stretching to the back wall. People were getting antsy. Some were just dropping their stuff and leaving, and I felt this sinking dread that our big break was about to turn into a total nightmare. Jade was ringing people up as fast as she could, and I was trying to help, but we only had 2 registers and it wasn't nearly enough. She disappeared into the back office for maybe 2 minutes, came out looking relieved, and said her cousin who worked in retail management was sending people over from some temp agency he used for emergencies like this. I didn't even ask questions. About 20 minutes later, 3 people walked in wearing black shirts and lanyards, saying they were from FlexStaff Services. There was this young guy named Josh, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, an older man named Raymond who'd clearly worked retail before, and a woman who introduced herself as Christine. She had dark hair pulled into a tight bun, wire-frame glasses that kept slipping down her nose, and this weirdly calm, practiced smile that made me feel like she'd worked 1,000 Black Fridays. I gave them the fastest crash course in history, showed them our register system, how to package items, where the bags were stored. Christine asked a ton of questions, way more than the other 2. Stuff about our return policy, whether we accepted international credit cards, if we had a limit on transactions. At the time, I just figured she was being thorough, maybe even a little too eager. But I was so grateful to have someone who seemed competent that I didn't think twice about it. We split up the registers. Jade took the main counter up front. I took the smaller one near the dressing rooms, and we set up a folding table in the middle of the store where Raymond and Josh could ring people up using our 2 backup tablets connected to Square. Christine said she'd float and help bag items keep the line moving, answer questions. For the first couple hours, it actually worked. The line was moving, people were buying armfuls of stuff, and the energy in the store was electric instead of angry. I was in this zone where I wasn't even really looking at faces anymore, just scanning tags, swiping cards, stuffing tissue paper into bags, thanking people on autopilot. Around 11 a.m., I noticed Christine had set up her own little station near the vintage denim section in the back corner. She'd pulled over one of our small side tables and had this compact card reader sitting on it, one of those portable square things that connects to a phone. When I caught her eye, she smiled and said something about helping move the line faster since people were clustering in that area anyway. It made sense. People were grabbing jeans and jackets from that section, and she was right there to check them out instead of making them walk all the way to the front. Efficiency. That's what I thought it was. I saw her ring up maybe a dozen people over the next hour. She had this smooth routine down, chatting with customers, complimenting their choices, and then pulling out her card reader with this little apologetic laugh about how old school it looked compared to our regular system. She'd swipe their cards, hand them a receipt from a little portable printer she had in her bag, and send them on their way with their items wrapped in our signature purple tissue paper. Couple of times I saw her tapping on her phone between customers, and I assumed she was processing the payments, making sure everything synced up. She looked legitimate. She acted legitimate. And honestly, I was too slammed to pay close attention. The day was a blur of transaction after transaction, and by the time we finally locked the doors at 8 p.m., I was so exhausted I could barely see straight. We'd made more in one day than we usually made in a month. The temp workers helped us straighten up a bit, and then they left. Christine was the last one out, and she actually thanked me for the opportunity, said she hoped we'd call flex staff again if we ever needed help. I remember she had this firm handshake and direct eye contact, the kind that makes you trust someone without even knowing why. Saturday morning came with a phone call that made my stomach twist. It was 9 a.m. and I was still in bed, absolutely wrecked from the day before, when my phone started vibrating across the nightstand. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The woman on the other end was crying, her voice high and panicked, and it took me a second to understand what she was even saying. She'd been in the store yesterday, bought a leather jacket and 2 pairs of jeans, paid at a register in the back corner. When she woke up this morning and checked her bank account, it was completely empty. Not just the amount she'd spent at our store, but everything. Her checking account, her savings, all of it drained overnight. She was sobbing, asking me what kind of scam we were running, threatening to call the police and report us for fraud. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept trying to calm her down, telling her there had to be some mistake, that we were a legitimate business and this made no sense. She said she had the receipt, it had our store name on it, and she'd paid with her card at our location. I asked her to describe who checked her out, and the second she said, a woman with glasses and dark hair in a bun, my entire body went cold. I told her I'd call her back, threw on clothes, and drove to the store faster than I probably should have. Jade was already there doing inventory, and when I told her what happened, her face went white. We pulled up our sales records from Friday, went through every single transaction logged in our system. The woman's name was on there, sure enough, a purchase for $247. But when we looked at the payment details, the transaction showed as completed through my register, not through any station in the back corner. Except I didn't remember ringing her up. I didn't remember her at all. We checked the other registers, checked Raymond and Josh's tablet sales, went through everything twice. Her transaction was there, marked as paid and closed, but something about it felt wrong. The timestamp showed 11:23 a.m., right around when I'd noticed Christine setting up in the back. Then my phone rang again. Different number, different woman, same exact story. She'd shopped yesterday, paid in the back corner of our store, woke up to find her account emptied. Then another call, then another. By noon, we had 6 people calling us, all of them hysterical, all of them saying the same thing. They'd paid at a register in the back, handled by a woman with glasses and dark hair, and now their accounts were destroyed. One guy said his credit card company flagged 17 fraudulent charges overnight, all to random overseas accounts. A younger woman said someone had tried to withdraw cash from an ATM in Brooklyn at 3 a.m., and she lived in Portland and had never been to New York in her life. Jade called the temp agency while I dealt with the flood of panicked customers. I was trying to take down information, trying to tell people we'd figure this out, trying not to completely lose it myself. When Jade hung up the phone, her face had this gray, hollow look that made my chest tighten. She said the number for FlexStaff services was disconnected, just a recorded message saying the number was no longer in service. She tried Googling the agency and there was nothing. No website, no reviews, no business registration, nothing. It was like the company didn't exist. I asked about her cousin, the one who supposedly sent the temp workers, and she pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and called him right there on speaker. He answered on the second ring, sounded confused about why we were calling. When Jade asked him about the temp workers he'd sent over, there was this long pause. Then he said he hadn't sent anyone. He didn't know what we were talking about. He'd been out of town for Thanksgiving and hadn't talked to Jade in over a month. She insisted someone had called claiming to be from him, and he just kept saying no, that wasn't him. He never made any calls. The realization hit us both at the same time. Nobody sent those workers. They just showed up, walked in like they belonged, and we let them. We called the police and 2 officers showed up around 2 p.m. They took our statements, looked at our security camera footage, and that's when things got even worse. Our cameras covered the front entrance, the main register area, and the dressing rooms, but we'd never installed one in that back corner where Christine had set up. Budget cuts from a couple years ago, we'd only kept the most essential angles covered. The footage showed her arriving, showed her moving around the store, showed her talking to customers, but there was nothing clear enough to really identify her. She'd positioned herself perfectly in the one blind spot we had. The officers took notes, said they'd file a report, and mentioned this sounded like a skimming operation they'd been tracking across several states. Apparently there'd been similar incidents at pop-up markets and busy retail locations. Always someone posing as temporary help, always using personal card readers to steal information. They said the devices she used probably had skimmers built in, copying card data and PINs while looking like normal transactions. One officer, this older guy with a thick mustache, said the sophisticated ones could even print legitimate-looking receipts, so nobody suspected anything until it was too late. He said Christine, or whoever she really was, probably had all that card data uploaded to servers overseas within hours, sold on the dark web by midnight. The next week was absolute hell. We had 43 people total who came forward saying they'd been victims, and that was just the ones who shopped at our store. The police said Christine and her crew, because they were certain now that Josh and Raymond were part of it too, had likely hit other locations that same weekend. Our business insurance didn't cover this kind of fraud, and legally we weren't liable since the customers had willingly handed over their cards, but that didn't matter. Our reputation was destroyed. People were leaving 1-star reviews online, calling us scammers, saying we were in on it. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly we were the boutique that let criminals steal from customers. Jade and I spent hours every day on the phone with victims, with our bank, with credit card companies, with lawyers trying to figure out what we could even do. We offered refunds to everyone affected even though we'd already paid out to our suppliers and barely had the cash flow to cover it. We just wanted to make it right somehow, even though none of it was really our fault. I kept replaying that day over and over, seeing Christine's calm smile, her careful questions, the way she'd positioned herself exactly where we couldn't see her clearly. The whole thing had been planned down to the last detail. One of the victims, a woman named Heather who'd lost nearly $8,000 between her checking and savings, became obsessed with tracking Christine down. She started her own investigation, spent hours on forums and Facebook groups dedicated to fraud victims, and actually found 2 other people from different cities who described the exact same woman hitting their workplaces during busy sales. One was a bookstore in Seattle, another was a farmer's market in Sacramento. Same description, same setup, same devastation left behind. Heather compiled everything into this massive document, and sent it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, convinced that if enough people reported it, someone would actually do something. The police had basically told us these people were ghosts, that they used fake identities and burned them after each job, moving to a new city and starting over with different names. They said our chances of finding her were almost zero. That reality was crushing. Knowing that someone could just walk into your life, destroy everything, and disappear like smoke. I started having nightmares about it, dreams where Christine would come back and I'd recognize her too late, or where I'd see her face in crowds and lose her before I could do anything. About 5 months later, in April, I got a call from a detective in Phoenix. He said they'd arrested a woman named Claire Drummond, along with 2 male accomplices, for running a nearly identical scam at an electronics retailer during their spring sale. When they searched her apartment, they found equipment for making fake employee badges, multiple card skimmers, burner phones, and a laptop with spreadsheets containing thousands of stolen credit card numbers. They also found wigs, different sets of glasses, and clothing in various styles. The detective said when they showed her our security footage, she didn't deny it. She actually laughed and said she'd hit over 60 locations in 3 years, mostly during major shopping events when stores were desperate for extra help and too busy to do proper background checks. She and her crew would research stores ahead of time, figure out which ones went viral or had big sales coming up, and just walk in pretending to be from temp agencies. Most places were so overwhelmed they didn't question it. She said the key was confidence and timing. Act like you belong, show up when chaos is already happening, and people will believe whatever you tell them. The arrest didn't undo the damage, but it felt like something. Claire Drummond was facing federal charges, and the detective said she'd likely spend years in prison given the scale of what she'd done. A lot of the victims would never see their money back. The card companies and banks were still fighting about liability, and plenty of people's credit was wrecked for years. Violet Thread survived, barely. Jade and I had to take out a loan to cover the refunds and keep the business afloat, and it took almost 2 years before our reviews started recovering. We installed cameras in every corner of the store, implemented a strict policy about only using our registered employees, and I became that paranoid owner who double-checks everything. Even now, 3 years later, I get anxious during busy sales. Every time someone pulls out a card, there's this split second where my brain goes into panic mode. I watch transactions like a hawk. I verify every employee personally, and I never ever let anyone set up their own station without me standing right there. What Christine, or Claire, or whatever her real name was taught me is that trust is a weapon. She knew exactly how to use it, and she knew that in moments of chaos, people drop their guard. The scariest part wasn't even the theft itself. It was how easy it was. How she just walked in, smiled, asked the right questions, and we handed her everything she needed to destroy people's lives. That's what keeps me up sometimes. Not what happened, but how simple it was to make it happen. The apartment felt way too quiet after my roommate moved out to live with his girlfriend. That was probably the real reason I got obsessed with upgrading my entertainment setup. My TV sat on this wobbly stand with built-in speakers that sounded like tin cans, and suddenly having the whole place to myself made me notice how bare everything looked. I'd been working help desk support for about a year since finishing my IT certificate program, finally making enough to stop worrying about every dollar, and I figured treating myself to something decent was overdue. Black Friday in 2023 came around, and I spent most of that night glued to my laptop, scrolling through deals and comparing specs. TechSavvy's website had this home theater system listed, normally $1,200 but marked down to $350. The discount seemed almost ridiculous, but I went through everything carefully. Checked the URL twice, verified the security badges, read through customer reviews. It was definitely the legitimate site, not some knockoff domain trying to scam people. My cursor hovered over that purchase button for at least a minute while I second-guessed myself, But everything checked out. The company was real, the reviews were positive, and people were posting photos of their actual deliveries. I clicked it. 11:30 at night, confirmation email hit my inbox immediately with tracking info and an order number. Delivery window was 3 to 5 business days. I actually felt giddy, like I'd beaten the system somehow. Called my buddy Kevin right after to brag about the deal. And he was so jealous he already started planning a movie marathon at my place once I got it set up. The next few days dragged on forever. I kept refreshing that tracking page obsessively, watching the package icon creep closer to my city, then my neighborhood. When Thursday came and I got a text saying delivery would happen between 2 and 6 that afternoon, I left work early. Told my supervisor I had a dentist appointment. There was no way I was missing this delivery and having to deal with rescheduling or driving across town to some pickup location. I got home around 1:30 and spent the next few hours doing absolutely nothing productive. Just pacing around, checking my phone every 10 minutes, looking out the window at every engine sound that passed by. The building I lived in was one of those older complexes with exterior stairs and individual entrances, so I could see the parking lot pretty clearly from my living room window. Around 4:15, this white cargo van pulled into the lot. It had magnetic signs on the sides that said Tech Savvy Express Delivery in blue lettering, and I felt this surge of excitement. Finally. The driver got out and I got a good look at him through the window. Tall guy, maybe 6'2", wearing a navy polo shirt with the Tech Savvy logo on it and khaki pants. He had this build that suggested he spent time at the gym, broad shoulders and thick arms. His hair was buzzed short, and he wore these wraparound sunglasses even though it was overcast. He pulled a large box out of the back of the van and headed toward my building. I opened the door before he could knock, probably looking way too eager. He gave me this friendly smile and said, "Delivery for apartment 2C, home theater system?" His voice was deep and steady, professional. I confirmed it was me and he handed me his tablet to sign. The signature screen was one of those standard digital pads. Nothing seemed off about it. He had calluses on his hands, the kind you get from manual labor, which made sense for someone hauling packages all day. After I signed, he shifted the box in his arms and said, "Hey, just so you know, these systems can be tricky to set up. Company policy now is we offer free installation to make sure everything connects properly. Saves you the headache of dealing with all those cables and settings." He said it casual, like he was doing me a favor. I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds, thinking about how I'd planned to figure it out myself since I work in IT. But then I thought about how much easier it would be to have someone who does this regularly just handle it. Plus, it was free. I stepped aside and let him in. He set the box down near my TV stand and immediately started surveying the room, eyes moving across everything like he was calculating the best setup. "Nice place," he said, pulling a box cutter from his pocket. "You live here alone?" The question didn't register as weird at the time. Delivery people make small talk, right? I told him, yeah, my roommate had just moved out. He nodded and started opening the box, pulling out the receiver, speakers, cables, all of it. He asked where my bathroom was, said he needed to wash his hands before handling the electronics because the van gets dusty. Pointed him down the hallway. He disappeared for maybe 30 seconds, came back wiping his hands on his pants. Then he got to work, or at least it looked like work. He unpacked everything methodically, laid the components out on my floor in this organized way that seemed professional. He plugged the receiver into the wall outlet behind my TV stand and started connecting cables to the back of my television. I stood there watching for a minute, then realized I was just hovering awkwardly. My laptop was sitting open on the kitchen counter where I'd left it that morning, and my wallet was next to it along with my car keys. I'd emptied my pockets when I got home out of habit. The guy was crouched behind the entertainment center, threading cables through, and he called out asking about my Wi-Fi password, so he could connect the system to the network for firmware updates. That made sense to me. I rattled off the password and he thanked me. Then he said he needed to grab some additional connectors from the van, that the box was missing a component. Said it would just take a minute. I told him no problem and he headed out the door. I heard his footsteps going down the exterior stairs, heard them fade into the parking lot. That's when the silence hit me. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes your brain start working overtime. I walked over to the window to see if he was coming back, just out of curiosity. The white van was gone. Completely gone. I stood there staring at the empty parking space where it had been, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe he parked somewhere else? Maybe he needed to move the van for some reason? But even as I thought it, I knew something was completely wrong. I turned around and my eyes went straight to the kitchen counter. The spot where my laptop had been was empty. Just the power cord lying there. My wallet, gone. My car keys, gone. For a few seconds I couldn't move, couldn't think. Then I practically ran to the hallway, checked the bathroom. My watch was missing from the sink counter where I'd left it. I went into my bedroom and my backup phone that I kept charging on my nightstand was gone too. The guy had moved through my apartment like he had a mental checklist. The home theater system was still there, half unpacked, cables everywhere. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, the only thing he hadn't gotten because it was on me, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock it. I called TechSavvy's customer service number, the one from their website, got through to someone after navigating their automated menu. I explained what happened, talking fast, probably not making complete sense. The representative went quiet for a second, then asked me to describe the driver again. I did. Tall, muscular, buzzed hair, wraparound sunglasses, navy polo with the logo. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice had changed, gotten more serious. She said they had no delivery scheduled to my address that day. Said they don't do installation services at all, never have. Their drivers drop packages at the door, get a signature and leave. That's it. The van, the uniform, the tablet, all of it was fake. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. She stayed on the line while I processed it, then told me I needed to call the police immediately and file a report. She also said this wasn't the first time they'd heard about something like this, that scammers had been intercepting legitimate orders somehow and showing up before the real delivery. I hung up and dialed 911, explained the situation to the dispatcher. They sent an officer out within 20 minutes. He was this older cop with gray hair and a tired expression, like he'd seen every variation of human garbage behavior. He took down all the details, asked me to describe the guy again, wrote everything in his little notepad. When I mentioned the magnetic signs on the van, he nodded slowly. Said those are easy to get made online, people use them for all kinds of scams. He asked if I had security cameras. I didn't. He asked if any neighbors might have seen the van or gotten the plate number. I told him I'd check but doubted it. The officer was honest with me in a way that somehow made it worse. He said chances of recovery were slim. Guys like this, they plan everything out. They're in and out fast, and by the time anyone realizes what happened, they're long gone. He told me to cancel my credit cards immediately, change all my passwords, and keep an eye on my bank accounts for any suspicious activity. The laptop was what killed me the most. I had work files on there, personal stuff, photos. The wallet had $200 cash, my debit card, my license. The car keys meant I couldn't even drive anywhere to deal with this mess. I asked the officer what I was supposed to do now. He said file the report, contact my bank and credit card companies, get my locks changed in case the guy made copies of my apartment key when he went to the bathroom. That thought hadn't even occurred to me yet. I felt sick. This stranger had been alone in my hallway. Probably went through my bedroom too, while I stood there like an idiot, watching him pretend to hook up cables. After the officer left, I called my apartment management and explained the situation. They sent a maintenance guy out that same evening to change my locks, which cost me $120 I didn't really have at that moment. I spent the rest of the night on my phone, which thankfully had enough battery, canceling cards and filing fraud alerts. My bank was helpful at least, said they'd monitor my account and reverse any unauthorized charges. I called Kevin and told him everything. He felt awful because he'd been so hyped about the deal. Kept saying he should have told me it sounded too good to be true, but that wasn't fair to him. I'd been the one who verified everything, who let a complete stranger into my home without asking for proper ID, without questioning anything. The real delivery from Tech Savvy showed up on Saturday, 2 days later. An actual driver in an actual company truck asked me to step outside for the signature and left the box right there on my doorstep. Refused to even come near my door. I couldn't blame him. I never got my stuff back. The police report went nowhere. Just another file in a system overloaded with cases that never close. My laptop was gone forever along with everything on it. Had to use my tax refund that year to replace it. The $200 cash was just gone. Getting a new license meant a trip to the DMV and sitting there for 3 hours. My car sat in the parking lot useless until I could afford to get new keys made from the dealership, which ran me another $240 because of course it did. The worst part wasn't even the money or the inconvenience. It was realizing how easily I'd been played. This guy read me perfectly, knew exactly what to say, how to act, what details would make me trust him, the professional demeanor, the uniform, the tablet, the casual small talk. He'd done this before, probably done it a dozen times. I was just another mark on his list. Now when I order anything online, I make the driver leave it outside. I don't care if it's pouring rain or if the box is massive. They can set it down and walk away. I'll drag it inside myself once they're gone. And I tell this story to anyone who will listen, because if it stops even one person from making the same mistake I did, then maybe it's worth reliving the embarrassment. Trust your instincts, verify credentials, and never let strangers past your threshold no matter how legitimate they seem. That $350 deal ended up costing me close to $2,000 when everything was said and done, not counting the stuff I lost that I can never replace. I remember that night like it happened last week. My husband Matt and I had just come back from one of those chaotic Black Friday sales, the kind where people line up before sunrise just to grab a deal. We weren't even planning to go, but our old TV had been flickering for months, and the sale was too good to ignore. We bought a 65-inch smart TV from an electronics store about 30 minutes away, got our receipt, and left feeling pretty proud of ourselves. It felt like one of those normal, domestic victories, the kind you brag about to friends over coffee. Later that afternoon, while I was unpacking groceries, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of the same store we'd been to. The man on the line sounded polite but businesslike, saying he was calling to confirm our delivery address because there had been a mix-up with another order. It didn't seem strange at first. We'd given our home address at checkout. He repeated our street name and zip code perfectly, and I confirmed it before hanging up. I even told Matt, half laughing, "At least they're making sure it goes to the right place this time." Neither of us thought anything of it. The evening went by quietly. Matt mounted the old TV on the wall one last time to stream a movie, while we waited for the new one to be delivered the next day. Around 11:30, I was sitting on the couch with a blanket, half asleep, when our dog, Luna, started pacing near the back door. She's usually calm at night, but her tail was stiff, and she kept growling in short, low bursts. Matt muted the TV and listened. Outside, we could hear the faint crunch of tires rolling over gravel. We didn't live on a busy street. It was one of those quiet neighborhoods where you instantly notice when something's out of place. Matt peeked through the living room curtains and frowned. A dark pickup truck had stopped across the street. No logo, no plates visible from that angle, just a pair of headlights cutting through the dark. The engine turned off, but the lights stayed on. "Probably someone lost," he muttered, though his voice didn't sound convinced. I remember how heavy the air felt, like the kind of stillness right before a thunderstorm. Luna wouldn't stop growling, and that's when I heard it. The faint metallic rattle of our back gate latch moving. Matt motioned for me to turn off the TV, and the room sank into silence. The only light came from the dim lamp beside the couch. We both listened, The kind of listening where every sound feels amplified. The latch clinked again, slower this time, like someone trying not to make noise. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Matt whispered that maybe it was an animal, but we both knew no raccoon would try to open a gate twice. He grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and moved quietly toward the back door while I stayed near the hallway, clutching Luna's collar to keep her from barking. When he shone the beam through the kitchen window, the gate stopped moving. Whoever was there had heard him. The flashlight caught a glimpse of something, maybe denim or maybe the reflection off metal, before it disappeared beyond the fence. We waited, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. The silence stretched until it almost felt unbearable. After a few minutes, Matt opened the door just enough to peek out, the cold air rushing in. He said the gate was open a few inches, swinging slowly. I told him to come back inside and lock it, which he did, double-checking the deadbolt before pulling the blinds shut. We sat together on the couch after that, neither of us talking much. The truck was still parked out front, lights off now, but we could see its shape in the faint glow of the street lamp. I thought about calling the police, but Matt didn't want to overreact. "If they're still there in 10 minutes, we'll call," he said. Those 10 minutes dragged on like an hour. Luna had stopped growling, but she stayed alert, ears twitching at every sound. Then, as if on cue, the truck's headlights blinked on again. It rolled forward slowly, stopping right in front of our driveway this time. Matt stood up, tense, and I grabbed my phone. Before I could even unlock it, we heard the gate again. This time, it wasn't the latch, but the hinges creaking open fully. The back motion sensor light turned on, flooding the yard in pale light. For a split second, I saw a silhouette near the shed, a tall figure motionless like it was staring straight at the house. Then the light went off, and everything went black again. I called 911 right away, my hands barely steady enough to type the passcode. The dispatcher answered fast, and I tried to explain that someone was in our backyard. She asked if they'd entered the house, and I said no, but they were close. She told us to stay inside, lock all doors, and wait for an officer. While I was still on the line, Matt went to grab the baseball bat he kept by the front door. The dispatcher asked if we could see the intruder. I told her no, just the truck still idling in front. She said a patrol car was on the way. Those next few minutes felt unreal. We didn't speak, just listened. The sound of footsteps moved along the gravel path behind the house, slow, deliberate. Then came a metallic clink, like someone brushing against the shed door handle. I whispered to the dispatcher what I was hearing, and she told me to stay put. That help was close. Matt whispered, "They're trying to see if the door's unlocked." I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until Luna let out one sharp bark that echoed through the house. The sound outside stopped immediately. No footsteps, no creak of the gate, nothing. A few seconds later, we heard the truck door slam shut. The engine roared, tires screeched against the road, and the sound faded into the distance. We didn't move until we saw red and blue lights reflecting through the front window. When the police arrived, 2 officers searched the yard. The gate was wide open, the latch bent slightly out of shape. One of the officers found boot prints in the mud, large ones leading from the fence to the shed and then back toward the gate. They took our statement, checked the camera on our doorbell, and told us we'd done the right thing calling. The footage showed the truck pulling up, but nothing behind the house. The camera didn't reach that far. The officer said there'd been a few similar reports in nearby neighborhoods that night. People pretending to confirm deliveries before showing up at homes. They suspected a group targeting big purchases from the sales. Hearing that made my stomach twist. They knew we'd bought something expensive, and they'd known where we lived. After the officers left, we couldn't bring ourselves to go to bed. We just sat in the living room with every light on, listening for any sound outside. Around 3 a.m., I walked to the kitchen window to check the backyard again. The gate was closed now. One of the officers must have done it, but something caught my eye near the shed. A small white sticker on the wood, barely noticeable in the dim porch light. When I stepped outside the next morning, I saw it up close. It was a barcode label with the name of the same electronics store printed on it, the kind they put on display boxes. Only, We hadn't bought anything that needed to be delivered. I called the store first thing that morning to ask about the call from the day before. The manager sounded confused and told me no one from their staff had made any calls after the sale ended. He checked our order and confirmed we'd taken the TV home ourselves, so there was no reason for anyone to ask about our address. I asked if the sticker I found could have come from them. He said all their inventory was accounted for, and their labels were kept in the back room. They didn't even use that particular format anymore. That's when it sank in that whoever called us had planned this carefully. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Matt said I was overthinking it, but even he started noticing things. A car idling down the street longer than usual, headlights slowing whenever we pulled into the driveway. We installed cameras around the yard and new locks on every door. For a while, nothing else happened. The police never found the truck, and the report was eventually closed as attempted burglary. But that label, I still have it. It's in a plastic bag in the drawer beside our bed. Sometimes I look at it just to remind myself it really happened. It's been years since that night, but every time Black Friday rolls around, I feel that same uneasy weight in my chest. We don't go to sales anymore, and we never answer unknown calls. The TV we bought that day still hangs on our wall, a constant reminder that some deals aren't worth the risk. I'll never forget the sound of that gate latch in the dark, or how close we came to something we still don't fully understand. Maybe they just wanted the TV, or maybe they wanted something or someone else. I had been scrolling through secondhand listings all week, hunting for a good Black Friday deal that didn't feel like a scam. Between juggling my part-time job and my sister's college tuition, I couldn't justify spending full price on anything luxurious. When I found a post for a genuine designer tote, the exact model I'd been eyeing for over a year, listed for barely a quarter of the retail cost, it almost felt like fate. The seller's profile looked normal. A few photos of cats, some furniture sales, and the bag itself displayed on a beige carpet with tags still attached. I messaged her, and she responded quickly, friendly, and direct. "I can meet you at the Crestview Mall garage," she wrote. "Early afternoon works best." That Saturday was cold and gray, the kind of afternoon where the air smelled faintly like wet concrete. I arrived 10 minutes early, partly because I'm anxious about punctuality, but also because I wanted to double-check the spot. The garage was busier than I expected, people loading boxes into SUVs, kids whining about toy stores, and the occasional honk echoing through the levels. I parked near a pillar painted with a fading letter C, texted the seller that I'd arrived, and waited. Her read receipt appeared instantly, but no reply came. After a few minutes, the crowd began to thin. The noise dulled, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights that flickered unevenly above me. I watched the reflection of my car in the polished concrete, trying to distract myself. When another 15 minutes passed, I typed again, something polite. "Still good to meet?" No answer. I checked the listing, thinking maybe she'd updated it or sold the bag to someone else, but it was still active. That's when a dark sedan rolled slowly past, then reversed, stopping about 20 feet away. The driver's window slid down halfway. A man leaned over from the driver's seat, smiling in a way that looked rehearsed. "You waiting on someone?" he asked, his tone casual, almost friendly. I hesitated, keeping my distance but nodding slightly. He tapped the passenger seat. "I think she sent me. Said she couldn't make it, but I've got the bag here. You can check it if you want." His voice had that kind of false confidence people use when they're improvising a lie. I didn't move closer, but I caught a glimpse of something shiny, maybe a shopping bag resting beside him. My gut told me to walk away, yet my brain kept insisting maybe this was just awkward communication. I told him I'd rather wait for the seller directly, that maybe there'd been a misunderstanding. He nodded like that made perfect sense, then opened his door anyway. The sound echoed sharply through the empty level. "No problem," he said, stepping out and stretching like someone who wanted to look harmless. He was in his mid-30s maybe, clean cut, wearing a baseball cap and a navy hoodie. In his right hand he held the bag, the same tan leather with gold hardware I'd seen in the photos. "See? It's legit," he said, holding it up with an easy grin. My heart sped up, torn between suspicion and that tiny flicker of greed that whispers, "Maybe this really is your lucky day." He started walking toward me, slow and deliberate. I took a few steps back, clutching my phone. "I'll just wait here," I said, trying to sound calm. The man stopped near the pillar by my car, eyes darting briefly to the garage exit ramp. "You can at least take a closer look," he said, placing the bag on the ground like an offering. For a second, the air felt heavy, dense with silence. I noticed the way he positioned himself, between me and the open path. Every instinct screamed that something wasn't right, and yet I still glanced down at the bag, as if confirming what my brain already knew. No deal online is worth this kind of gut tension. Then his tone shifted. "You don't trust me?" he asked, almost laughing but not quite. I tried to step sideways, but he moved the same direction, mirroring me. The bag was just a prop now. He wasn't even pretending to sell it anymore. His eyes had that cold focus, like he'd been waiting for the right second. "You came alone, right?" The question hit harder than I expected. I said nothing, pulling my phone tighter in my hand, ready to dial someone, anyone. He took another step, voice lower. "Let me help you carry it to your car." The words sounded more like an order than an offer. He lunged, not fast, but calculated. I darted around the pillar, my shoes sliding on the slick concrete. He reached for my arm, his grip rough enough to scrape the skin through my jacket. I screamed, loud, desperate, the kind of sound that bursts out without planning. The noise bounced through the garage, sharper than the fluorescent buzz above us. Somewhere across the level, a car alarm chirped, maybe triggered by my voice or maybe coincidence. He froze mid-movement, eyes wide for half a heartbeat, then turned back toward his car. The bag toppled as he ran, its handles twisting under the tire as he sped off down the ramp. I stood there shaking, half expecting him to come back. My throat hurt from yelling, and for a moment I couldn't tell if the footsteps echoing nearby were real or just my pulse pounding in my ears. A woman's voice called out, someone asking if I was okay. And I finally saw a couple emerging from the elevator area, holding shopping bags. They looked startled when they noticed me against the pillar. The man hurried over, glancing at the abandoned tote still lying near my feet. "Did someone just try to grab you?" he asked. I could barely speak, just nodded. He muttered something and started dialing security while his wife stayed with me, keeping her hand near my shoulder like she didn't want to scare me further. Security arrived within minutes, 2 guards jogging up with radios in hand. I gave them the best description I could. Dark sedan, mid-30s, navy hoodie, baseball cap. One of them knelt by the bag, opening it cautiously with gloves on. Inside wasn't a designer label, just an old purse stuffed with newspapers and a small GPS tracker taped to the lining. Seeing that thing made my knees buckle. Whoever he was, he hadn't been improvising. He'd planned for someone to take the bag, to drive off with it, and for him to know exactly where they went. The guard just looked at me and said quietly, "You got really lucky today." The police showed up not long after, took my statement, and walked me through surveillance footage. The cameras on that level had been broken for months. Maintenance delay, they said. But they caught his car entering and exiting. No plates visible, just a flash of the same dull blue paint reflecting the overhead lights. An officer asked if I'd noticed any other strange messages or listings connected to the seller's profile. When I checked again later, the account was gone, like it had never existed. The listing, the chat history, everything. For weeks after, I couldn't scroll through online deals without feeling my chest tighten. Every time I parked in a garage, I'd catch myself checking around pillars and mirrors before stepping out. It's been years now, and I still remember the sound of his footsteps hitting the concrete, and that calm voice saying he just wanted to help. I tell this story not to scare people, but because I almost learned the hard way how far someone will go to make a trap look ordinary. That bag, that garage, that day, they were all bait, and I still think about how close I came to being the one he actually drove away with. Black Friday has always been chaos where I live, but that year, I decided to brave it anyway because my old headphones had finally given up. I remember being half awake, running on cheap coffee and the thrill of maybe catching a deal. The mall was a madhouse. People shouting, carts bumping into each other, security trying to keep some order while pop music blared over the speakers. I remember thinking the air smelled like perfume, plastic, and sweat. I ended up in line at an electronics store, holding a box of wireless headphones I didn't even plan to buy. But they were half off, and it felt like winning a small battle. The cashier who rang me up looked young, maybe mid-20s, with messy blonde hair and a small scar along his left eyebrow. His name tag said Derek. He was talkative in a way that caught me off guard. He asked if I'd been waiting long, joked about surviving the storm, and told me he'd been working since 4 a.m. He didn't seem creepy or anything, just tired but friendly. When he handed me the bag, he smiled and said, "Don't lose your receipt. People keep coming back saying they dropped theirs." I laughed, said thanks, and left. That was the end of it, or so I thought. That night I got home around 6, still buzzing from the chaos of the day. I lived alone in a small second-floor apartment near the highway. Nothing fancy but quiet most of the time. I threw the shopping bag on the couch, ordered takeout, and spent the evening scrolling through deals I didn't need. By midnight, I was half asleep on the couch when my phone buzzed. My doorbell camera had detected motion. I figured it was a stray cat, or maybe someone delivering a late package. But when I checked the feed, I froze for a good 10 seconds trying to understand what I was seeing. Derek was standing right outside my door. Same clothes as earlier. Store uniform, name tag, everything. He was holding a shopping bag and looking straight at the camera like he knew I'd be watching. After a few seconds, he leaned closer and spoke, his voice low but clear enough to hear through the mic. "Hey," he said, "you left your credit card at the register. Thought I'd drop it off." My first instinct was confusion. I clearly remembered putting my card back in my wallet after paying. I'm a bit obsessive about checking that kind of thing. Still, the way he said it sounded calm, polite even, like he was doing me a favor. I didn't answer the intercom, just watched him stand there for maybe a minute, shifting the bag between his hands. When I didn't come to the door, he rang the bell again, a long press this time. The sound filled my apartment, sharp and echoing in a way that made my chest tighten. I typed a quick message to a friend, just a casual, "Hey, weird question. Can a cashier track your address?" and went back to the feed. He wasn't at the door anymore. The camera showed only the hallway light flickering and the faint outline of the bag sitting on the floor near my welcome mat. I didn't move for several minutes, just stared at it, waiting for something else to happen. Eventually, I checked my wallet. Card right there, exactly where it should be. That's when my heart started pounding for real. I locked every window, double-checked the door, and sat back on the couch with my phone in hand. When I looked at the feed again, the bag was gone. He must have come back to take it while I wasn't looking. The next morning, I called the store. I tried to sound calm, like I was just clearing up a misunderstanding. The woman on the phone put me on hold, came back after a few minutes and said no cards had been reported missing, and no employees were authorized to visit customers outside of work. I asked if Derek was working that day, and she hesitated before saying, "We don't have anyone by that name here." She sounded sincere, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, like she was checking and not finding what she expected. She said she'd talk to her manager and call me back. She never did. That night, I rewatched the footage again, trying to convince myself it had been some mix-up. Maybe he'd given me a fake name at the register. Maybe he'd quit right after his shift. Maybe I was overreacting. But when I paused the video at the right second, I noticed something strange. His name tag looked slightly different than I remembered. The logo wasn't the same. It looked older, faded, like an old version of the store's branding. I even Googled images from previous years to compare. The uniform he wore hadn't been used by the company for almost a decade. That detail started eating at me. I couldn't stop thinking about it while getting ready for bed. I told myself maybe I was remembering wrong, that maybe the store still had leftover uniforms lying around. But when I checked the timestamp on the video, I noticed something even more unnerving. The camera's date reset itself right after that clip. Everything recorded after midnight was missing. Just a gap, like the system had rebooted on its own. I hadn't touched the settings. Had never done that before. The following evening, I stopped by the mall again just to see for myself. The electronics store was there, same spot, same layout. But the cashier station where Derek had been was now closed off with a sign that read, "Under renovation." I asked one of the employees about him, a woman stacking phone cases near the counter. Her face went blank for a second, then she said, "You mean the guy who used to work here? He hasn't been around in years. Quit after some incident." She trailed off before I could ask more, and a manager appeared out of nowhere, smiling too quickly, asking if I needed help finding anything. The woman avoided eye contact. I just said no thanks and left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. Around 2 a.m., I checked the camera again. The timestamp was correct this time, and everything looked normal, until a motion alert popped up. I tapped the live feed and saw the bag again, the same one from before, sitting in the same spot outside my door. No one was there this time, no footsteps, no shadow moving away. I just stared at it until my eyes watered. When I finally got up the nerve to open the door, the hallway was empty. The bag was filled with shredded paper. I moved out 2 weeks later. The management company probably still has my forwarding address, but I never updated the camera account. Sometimes I still get motion alerts from that old place, random pings in the middle of the night. I don't open them anymore. The thumbnail always looks the same anyway, someone standing close to the lens just out of focus, holding a shopping bag.